Hey, what's going on, everybody? Hope you're doing well. This video is about the UI settings in Halo Infinite, which is maybe a underutilized portion of the settings now that I've sort of taken a look at it. There's actually some really cool things that you can do in there. The original reason why I sort of had an idea to make this video is because of one particular portion of the UI settings, which is this weapon offsets settings that you can do, and it's really cool. So we'll talk about that, but that sort of led me to look at what the other options are as well. And again, there's some pretty cool stuff that you can do to play around with your UI and your HUD and things like that. So we'll go through sort of all of these settings. We'll skip some of them because they're not all quite as interesting. But yeah, so we'll sort of go through the good stuff, I guess, and sort of talk about what's available, the different settings, and then sort of show you what they do and the effects that they have. Okay, actually, before we get started and get into the actual settings, I thought it would be interesting to just show like a quick before and after of what my settings, the default settings were and what the screen looks like, and then sort of what my screen looks like after I had made some adjustments. So I'll show you, again, sort of a before default setting screen, and then an after of what my screen now looks like after messing with some of these settings. Okay, so starting off, we'll just sort of work from the top down, I suppose. That makes sense. So the first section that you have is sort of all the settings for your HUD, or your heads-up display. So on screen, that's going to be like your radar in the bottom left, the score and the time limit in the middle bottom, and then your weapon and ammo, equipment, grenade, bottom right. So you do have the option to just completely turn that off, which looks nice. Honestly, I kind of like it. It's super clean. However, you're losing out on a bunch of information that's kind of valuable. But I guess, if you want sort of like that cinematic look while you're playing, you can absolutely do that, which is kind of nice. However, there is sort of a middle ground with that where you can change the opacity of it. So I think the default is 0.5. I tried to get everything back to the default. But you can play around with that. So if you want it just like really faint, you can do that as well. Or you can crank it up so it, it's really bold and stands out on your screen. The next thing, so tips and tutorials, you can turn that off. So that's the little box that shows up every once in a while. It's like if you melee somebody in the back, it's an insta-kill. Like those little boxes will pop up in like the top or middle right of your screen. So you can turn those off once you're an expert. You don't need any more tips. Text, we're sort of just going to skip all this with the text stuff. This is kind of cool. So I've been playing around with this to see where I kind of want it, but you can move the HUD into more of like the center of the screen. So if we change this to 50, you can see you sort of have it all closer to your sort of eye line, I guess. And so everything, you don't have to like look to the left and look to the right, depending on how big your monitor is, I guess. So I've kind of been playing around with this where I have it at 50, and that way you have sort of everything like real close to your eye line. Which I kind of like. You can, obviously, if you go you have to be careful with that. If you go to 100, then it's just all smushed together and it looks ridiculous. You can also play with the vertical aspect of that as well. So I'm going to put that back to 50, and then you can bring it up if you want. Like that, to me, that's just like ridiculous. But if you want to bring it up really high, you can do that as well. So I just keep it at 0. Or whoops, that's the horizontal. So I've been going 50 and 0, and I kind of like that. We're gonna skip that. The FPS counter and network statistics. So I usually, for my games, I like to have this stuff on. So that's in your sort of the top of the screen. You can see the latency and the FPS that you're getting. The latency gives you a good excuse to blame lag if you die. You can see that your latency is at like 200 or something, and then also just keeping an eye on frames. If your frame rate drops, I just like to be aware of that. So you can tick that on and sort of keep aware of that stuff. Moving on to outlines and colors. So this is probably one of the more important settings in the UI, in the sense that it's going to have one of the bigger impacts in terms of what you're visually seeing on the screen as you're playing. And it basically allows you to change the colors of both the enemy team players and then the players that are on your team. And then we'll talk about this fire team marker color as well. But I've been using pineapple for the enemy. But I mean, there's all sorts of different colors you can change that to. Purple, there's like 4 different purples. But yeah, this will be like the outline of the enemy player. And then when you're shooting their shields, sort of the color of their shields as well. And then I think the default was these two. I didn't change these. But I'm going to put a video at the end of this, sort of a compilation of all of the different colors and what they look like. So you can sort of get a visualization of what it is in game. So this will change not only the player characters models, but it'll also change like the color of the enemy flag and like the like markers on the enemy base and things like that. So I'll show you sort of what each one of those colors looks like at the end of the video. So stay tuned. Moving on. Oh, and then fire team color. So this will be the nameplate above the character. If they're in your squad, it'll be whatever this color is. So typically, if they're on your team, it'll be a blue nameplate above the player. But if they're in your squad, it'll be green. In relation to that, you can sort of turn on and off the player markers or the nameplates above the characters. I like to have the enemy nameplates. I like to have them all on, honestly, but particularly the enemy names, just because you sort of get into those back and forths with that one particular guy. So you can sort of keep tabs, and you have sort of like that in-game, those games where you sort of have a nemesis. You can sort of keep tabs on that particular person. So I like to have that on, but you can turn these off if you want to. Moving on to UI visual effects. So these 3 settings are all pretty subtle. It's kind of, for me, it was sort of hard to tell if I was even making a difference turning them on and off. But I'll try and do sort of a on-off comparison screenshot so you can see. But really, it's changing the visuals of the HUD. I think the easiest one to see is the parallax. So with it on, if you look at the HUD, it sort of wiggles around as you move your mouse. Again, this might be kind of hard to see. The bottom, those like lines at the very bottom, you can see them sort of like bouncing up and down on the screen below like the score and the time limit. You can see them sort of like bobbing up and down. So you can turn that off, which again, this stuff's all like super subtle, but if you turn that off, everything's static, which I actually like better. Again, I probably wouldn't even notice while I'm playing, but I sort of like that it's just static and it doesn't move on the screen. So I have that off. And then I'll try, again, like I said, I'll try and do a screenshot of both. Where are we at? With these off. I think it looks a little cleaner. It's a lot easier to see with a screenshot comparing them side by side. So I have it off, but again, it's one of those things that's like super subtle if you even notice if it was on or off. But I have all that stuff off personally. Moving on, this stuff, this is all just like observer, like when you're like watching another player. If you want to look through those settings, feel free. But I'm not super interested in that. Theater settings. Now we get to my favorite thing, which is the weapon offset. So this will essentially adjust where your weapon is at on screen, and you can set it so that you get sort of more screen real estate, if you will, by adjusting this a little bit. So again, I might try and ordnance dropping from orbit. Ordnance is coming. I might try and do some like side-by-side comparisons of what this looks like, but just so you know, I guess, what I do for what I've done for all of this, so you can change it for the melee weapons, the pistol weapons, the rifle weapon, and the heavy weapons. So like that'd be like rocket launchers and things. Melee would be sword and hammer. But as we adjust this, you should be able to see it. It's sort of faded out if you can see my gun. If we move this right or left, that moves your weapon right or left. So I like to have mine all the way to the right, and then vertical, we can go up or down. So I have that go all the way down. And then depth goes in and out. So I have that go all the way in. So that basically gives you like the smallest gun possible, I guess. So you can see here, you get a little bit more screen real estate and your gun isn't taking up quite as much of your screen. If you go sort of the opposite end where it's like super ridiculous, but you reverse all this, then you can like play like this, which if that's how you want to play, by all means, but that's a little much for my taste. So like I said, I like to go through and change all of these to, I gotta remember what it is here, this, so 100, negative 100, negative 100. So I have all of these set that way. And then So that's how I've been playing. And again, I'll try and do like some side-by-sides of what the default is and then what the minimized version of that is, so you can sort of see the impact of that as well. All right, so I think that's all of the UI settings that we want to cover. So like I said, for this outlines and colors, I'm going to, at the end of this, sort of put a compilation of all of the different colors in-game, what they look like in-game on an actual character model, so you can sort of see what that is. And then I'm also show you sort of like what the flag color looks like, just so you can sort of see and get an idea of the difference and maybe, you know, find your favorite color that you want to use. So I'll do that. Other than that, that should do it. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you later. Bye.
Deftly mangled. Inbound. Wheels en route. From orbit.